Today, you and I are going to look at 7 dark chocolate brands sold in Australia that are marketed as the smarter choice, the sophisticated choice, even the healthier choice. But when you flip the label, they are close to 50% sugar. Because right now, in Coles, Woolworths and independent supermarkets, there are dark chocolate blocks and cooking bars that contain as much or even more sugar than some milk chocolates, while the words dark and cocoa on the front quietly make Aussie shoppers drop their guard. Stay to the end, because after we walk through the 7 worst offenders, I will show you the dark chocolates that actually behave like dark chocolate, and the one simple rule that will protect your trolley every time you walk down that aisle. When you and I hear the words dark chocolate, we do not picture junk food. We picture something almost medicinal. A square or 2 after dinner, less sugar, more cocoa, maybe even an antioxidant halo. For years, health headlines have told Australians that dark chocolate is the better chocolate. Higher cocoa, lower sugar, a treat you can feel a bit less guilty about. But here is the part nobody talks about. There is no strict legal definition in Australia for how much cocoa a product must contain before it can be called dark chocolate on the front of the pack. Food Standards Australia. New Zealand sets minimum cocoa solids for milk and plain chocolate. But dark is mostly a marketing term. Choice's 2025 Dark Chocolate Review found that while very high cocoa products, above 90%, contained as little as 2 to 7 grams of sugar per 100 grams, the sweetest dark chocolate in their test contained 53.6 grams of sugar per 100 grams. Several mainstream dark blocks in Australian supermarkets sit between 49 and 52 grams of sugar per 100 grams. In other words, they are roughly half sugar. So let us flip that label around for a second. If the first or second ingredient is sugar, and the sugar line on the nutrition panel sits near 50 grams per 100 grams, you are not eating some magical, healthier chocolate. You are eating a candy bar that happens to be darker in color. Number 1 is a brand you might reach for because it feels more grown up than milk chocolate. But the sugar numbers tell a very different story. Number 1. Darrell Lea Traditional Dark Chocolate Block. Darrell Lea is one of those names that feels safe. It is Australian. It is nostalgic. You see the word traditional and the word dark together, and it feels like an old-fashioned, no-nonsense chocolate. But nutrition data shows that a Darrell Lea dark chocolate block contains 49.7 grams of sugar per 100 grams. Choice lists Darrell Lea Traditional Dark Chocolate among the 5 highest sugar dark chocolates in their test, sitting right near the top of the sugar table. Let that sink in. Almost 50% of the block is sugar by weight. The ingredients panel for a Darrell Lea dark chocolate block reads sugar, cocoa mass, vegetable oil, anhydrous milk fat, emulsifiers and flavor, with cocoa solids in the low to mid-40s by percentage. So on the front you see dark chocolate and rich and full-bodied. On the back you see sugar listed first, vegetable oil in the mix, and less than half the block made up of cocoa solids. So why is this a problem? Because many Aussies buy Darrell Lea Dark thinking it is a mature, slightly healthier upgrade from milk chocolate. In reality, you are getting a bar where sugar is the main ingredient and cocoa is in second place. If you have ever bought a Darrell Lea dark block to be good compared with a milk block, you are not alone. If this is already in your cupboard, do not panic. But next time, here is what I would do instead. Check the sugar line. If you see anything around 50 grams per 100 grams, treat it as a treat, not as a health upgrade. And if you thought that was bad, number 2 is the finest dark cooking chocolate that turns out to be over half sugar. Number 2, Nestle Plaistowe, the finest dark 45% cocoa. Plaistowe is Nestlé's serious baking chocolate. It sits in the baking aisle in a restrained wrapper that says the finest dark 45% cocoa. It looks like the product you buy when you are taking your baking or your dark chocolate seriously. But Choice's 2025 Dark Chocolate Guide found that Nestle Plaistowe, the finest dark, 45% cocoa, had the highest sugar content of all the dark chocolates they tested, at 53. 6 grams of sugar per 100 grams. That is more than half sugar by weight. Nutritional information for Whittaker's Dark Ghana, another 72% cocoa dark chocolate, shows 27 grams of sugar per 100 grams. Lindt Excellence 70% cocoa, a well-known dark bar, lists 30 grams of sugar per 100 grams. Plaistowe, the finest dark, 45% cocoa, sits way above both of those at 53. 6 grams. So on the front, you see dark and finest and 45% cocoa. On the back, more than half the bar is sugar. So why is this a problem? Because 45% cocoa sounds substantial to the average shopper. It sounds like you're getting a serious dark bar, but in practice, that leaves plenty of room for sugar, and Plaistowe uses that room very aggressively. If you have ever grabbed Plaistowe Dark thinking it was a better choice than a cheap milk block, what you are really buying is a sugar-heavy baking chocolate that behaves much closer to confectionery than to a high cocoa dark. If this is already in your pantry for brownies and ganache, do not panic. But next time, compare the sugar per 100 grams with other dark chocolates on the shelf. There is no reason your dark baking chocolate needs to be more than 50% sugar when other brands manage real dark flavor at half that amount. And if you thought baking chocolate was the only trap, number 3 is a supermarket dark cooking block that behaves more like a sugar bar with a bit of cocoa dusted on. Number 3, Woolworths Essentials Dark Choc Cooking Block. In the baking aisle at Woolworths, there is a cheap dark cooking block under the Essentials brand. It is marketed as a convenient dark choc block for home baking, melting and desserts. Choice's dark chocolate sugar table lists Woolworths Essentials dark choc cooking block at 50 grams of sugar per 100 grams. That puts it firmly in half sugar territory. Choice notes that many supermarket dark cooking products are not true dark chocolate at all, but compound products based on sugar and vegetable fats with relatively low cocoa content. Woolworth's own compound dark products in the baking aisle typically list sugar first, followed by vegetable oils such as palm oil, and only then cocoa powder. So on the front, you see dark choc cooking block with rich melted chocolate imagery. On the back, it is sugar first, vegetable oil second, cocoa at a much lower level. So why is this a problem? Because many Aussies buy supermarket dark cooking blocks to save money versus branded baking chocolate, or to get more intense dark flavor in cakes and slices. But if half the block is sugar, you are not adding dark cocoa intensity. You are adding a big sugar hit with some cocoa flavor layered on top. If this is already your go-to block for brownies and hedgehog slice, do not panic. You can still use what you have. But next time, I would treat these cheap compound dark blocks as flavored sugar bars, not as real dark chocolate, and I would reserve them for recipes where texture matters more than cocoa quality, because what you are about to hear changes the way you look at dark chocolate from the big household names. Number 4 is the classic dark brand many people pick up when they are trying to be a bit more responsible. But Choice shows the sugar story is not what you expect. Number 4, Cadbury Old Gold Dark Chocolate Original. Cadbury Old Gold has long been marketed as the grown-up Cadbury. It sits right next to dairy milk on the shelf, but with black and gold packaging, richer cocoa notes and flavors like Old Jamaica and roast almond. Many Aussies treat Old Gold as the healthier, or at least more sophisticated choice when they move away from milk chocolate. But Choice's dark chocolate sugar breakdown shows Cadbury Old Gold Dark Chocolate Original contains 7 grams of sugar per 100 grams. That is more than half sugar by weight, and significantly more sugar than higher cocoa dark bars from Lindt or Whittaker's. So on the front you see dark chocolate and rich cocoa. On the back, the sugar line is over 50 grams per 100 grams, and sugar is still the first ingredient. So why does that matter? Because the entire selling point of switching from milk chocolate to dark is supposed to be less sugar and more cocoa. In the case of Old Gold Original, you are getting a different flavor profile, but you are not escaping the sugar in any meaningful way. If you have ever bought Old Gold for yourself while buying dairy milk for the kids, thinking you were making a smarter choice, you have basically bought the same sugar load in a darker costume. If this is already your nightly square, do not panic. But next time, compare the sugar per 100 grams and the cocoa percentage with a 70% bar from Lindt or a 72% from Whittaker's. You will see immediately which one behaves like real dark chocolate and which is still very close to a confectionery bar. And if that is what is happening in the eating range, number 5 is where the same brand quietly repeats the trick in the baking aisle. Number 5, Cadbury Baking Dark Chocolate. Go down the baking aisle and you will find Cadbury Baking Dark Chocolate, often used for cakes, brownies and desserts. The branding and purple color make it feel like a trustworthy, slightly more serious companion to Cadbury's eating blocks. But Choice's Dark Chocolate Sugar Chart lists Cadbury Baking Dark Chocolate at 51. 7 grams of sugar per 100 grams, the same as Old Gold Original. So once again, more than half the block is sugar. The problem is not that baking chocolate contains sugar. The problem is that for many Aussie home bakers, baking dark chocolate sounds like a concentrated cocoa ingredient. They imagine they are adding deep chocolate flavor with the sugar already measured out separately in the recipe. In reality, if you use a baking dark block that is half sugar, you are adding a huge sugar load from the chocolate itself before you even get to the granulated sugar in the bowl. So why is this important? Because it completely changes the nutritional reality of your dark chocolate brownies or mud cakes. You might think you are just using a bit of dark chocolate, when in fact you are using an ingredient where sugar is the main component. If Cadbury Baking Dark is your default block for every birthday cake, do not panic. You can still finish the ones on hand. But for your next bake, I would at least try a higher cocoa dark block or chips with less sugar and more cocoa, especially if you are already adding plenty of sugar elsewhere in the recipe, and if you thought brand power was the whole problem. Number 6 is the budget dark chocolate that behaves almost identically in terms of sugar. Number 6, generic supermarket dark chocolate blocks with sugar first. Beyond the big brands, Choice's review also highlights that many supermarket-labeled dark chocolates sit very high on the sugar scale. The Woolworths Essentials dark choc cooking block at 50 grams sugar per 100 grams is one example. Choice notes that these types of products are often based on sugar and vegetable oil, with cocoa powder at low percentages. The pattern repeats across the cheaper end of the market. Sugar is the first ingredient. Cocoa solids content is often around 40 to 45%. Sugar per 100 grams can be close to or at 50 grams, so you get something that looks like dark chocolate, melts like a compound block, and costs less than the premium bars. But in terms of sugar, you are not getting an improvement over the big brands at all. So why should that worry Australians? Because a lot of families trade down to supermarket-labeled dark blocks during a cost of living crunch, assuming they are compromising on brand prestige but not on health profile. In practice, they are often buying a product that is just as sugar-heavy as the premium dark from the confectionery giants. If these supermarket-labeled dark blocks are already in your pantry, do not panic. Just treat them as what they are, reasonably priced sweets, not health food. And if you are baking for someone who is trying to cut back on sugar, read the panel carefully before assuming dark means better. And if that feels like a lot, number 7 is the curveball, the dark chocolate-coated products that ride the halo while still behaving like sugar bombs. Number 7. Dark chocolate-coated snacks and biscuits with milk chocolate sugar profiles. The last group on this list is not a single block. It is an entire category of dark chocolate-coated snacks and biscuits from many brands that use a dark coating as a marketing tool while keeping the sugar profile very close to milk chocolate. Look at how they are built. The coating is often compound dark chocolate, which means sugar and vegetable fats, sometimes hydrogenated, plus cocoa powder and flavor. The biscuit, wafer or fruit center already contains sugar. The combined nutrition panel frequently shows total sugars near or above 50 grams per 100 grams for the coated portion. Choice's dark chocolate guidance points out that the only way to really judge sugar content is to read the nutrition information, not trust the word dark on the front. It is very easy for a manufacturer to create a darker colored coating and call it dark chocolate flavor, while the overall product remains a high sugar confection. So what does that mean for your trolley? It means that dark chocolate-coated rice cakes, pretzels, biscuits and nuts are often candy in disguise. Yes, the flavor is more bitter than milk chocolate. No, that does not mean you have escaped the sugar. If you reach for these as your healthier indulgence, you might be very close to the same sugar hit as a standard mainstream chocolate bar. If this is already your office snack or nightly treat, do not panic. But next time, check the sugar per 100 grams and ask yourself, if this is close to 50 grams, would I still tell myself this is better just because it is dark? The pattern hiding in your dark chocolate. See the pattern? Different brand, same playbook. Use the word dark and the cocoa percentage on the front to create a health halo. Keep sugar as the first ingredient in many products. Sit the sugar line around 49 to 53 grams per 100 grams in some of the worst offenders. Rely on the fact that most Aussies will never convert that into half this bar is sugar. Choice's dark chocolate review makes the contrast obvious. At the low sugar end, products like Lindt Excellence 95% cocoa have just 9 grams of sugar per 100 grams. Whittaker's 92% cocoa Ghana. Intense dark chocolate has 4 grams. Lindt Excellence 90% cocoa has 7 grams. At the high sugar end, Nestle Plaistowe, the finest dark, 45% cocoa has 6 grams. Darrell Lea traditional dark sits at 7 grams. And several big household brands and cooking blocks sit above 50 grams. Same aisle, same word, dark, totally different reality. This is where it stops being about one bar and starts being about how the Australian chocolate market shifted under our feet. Cocoa prices spiked in 2024. Manufacturers could have raised prices honestly and kept recipes simple. Instead, many shrank their products, reformulated with cheaper ingredients, and leaned even harder on marketing terms like dark, rich, intense, and 45% cocoa to keep shoppers feeling safe. Most Australians never noticed because we were not looking at the right line. We were looking at the front of the pack, not the sugar per 100 grams. So what do we actually do differently? Now let us talk about dark chocolate that is actually worth your time. If I had to rebuild my dark chocolate drawer from scratch for my own family, I would start with one simple rule. Ignore the word dark. Look at 2 numbers, the cocoa percentage, the sugar per 100 grams. Here is what that means in practice. First, aim for at least 70% cocoa if you actually want the benefits of dark chocolate. Lindt Excellence, 70% cocoa lists 30 grams of sugar per 100 grams. Whittaker's Dark Ghana, 72%. Cocoa lists 27 grams of sugar per 100 grams. That is still sweet, but it is a world away from 50 to 53 grams per 100 grams. Second, understand that the higher you go in cocoa, the less room there is for sugar. Choice's low sugar dark chocolate list shows Lindt Excellence, 95% cocoa at 9 grams of sugar per 100 grams. Whittaker's 92% Cocoa Ghana Intense at 6. 4 grams. Lindt Excellence 90% Cocoa at 7 grams. If you genuinely want dark chocolate as a small, rich, low-sugar treat, this is where to look. Third, treat any dark chocolate with less than 50% cocoa and more than 45 to 50 grams sugar per 100 grams as what it is, a sugar-heavy sweet with a slightly different flavor profile. That includes Darrell Lea Traditional Dark Chocolate at 49. 7 grams sugar per 100 grams. Nestle Plaistowe, the finest dark, 45% cocoa at 53. 6 grams sugar per 100 grams. Several mainstream dark blocks and baking chocolates listed above 50 grams in Choice's sugar table. These are not off limits. They are just not health food. If I had to pick 3 everyday dark options for my own house from the mainstream shelves, I would start with a 70% bar from a major brand with sugar around 30 grams per 100 grams. A 72% bar like Whittaker's Dark Ghana with sugar around 27 grams. A very high cocoa bar, above 85% for when I want 1 or 2 squares and very little sugar. These are not perfect, but they behave like dark chocolate is supposed to behave. More cocoa, less sugar, clear trade-off in taste. Final message and what you can do next. Australian chocolate culture drifted from simple milk blocks and honest dark to a maze of intense, rich, finest, and baking dark products where the word dark often hides the same or even higher sugar load than regular chocolate. We stopped asking what was in the block because we trusted the color, the packaging, and cocoa percentages that sound impressive but still leave plenty of room for sugar. Most Aussies see a black wrapper and a big cocoa number and assume they have made a smarter choice, without ever reading that the sugar line can sit around 50 grams per 100 grams in some of these bars. But every time you and I quietly flip the block, find the sugar per 100 grams, and put back anything sitting near 50 grams when we actually wanted dark chocolate, we send a small message. We tell manufacturers that the dark chocolate lie is not invisible anymore. We stop rewarding products that lean on color and words instead of honest ingredients. And it is not just about the numbers on a label, it is about what we normalize in our homes. If our kids grow up thinking that dark chocolate is automatically better while half the block is still sugar, then the food industry has won a very quiet, very powerful game. Choosing differently is how we take a little bit of that power back. So here is the simple step I would love you to try after this video. Next time you are in the chocolate aisle, pick up your usual dark block and check 2 things. How much sugar per 100 grams? How much cocoa percentage on the front? If it is below 50% cocoa and close to 50 grams sugar per 100 grams, be honest with yourself. This is a sweet, not a health upgrade. If you still want it, enjoy it as a treat. But stop letting the word dark trick you into thinking it lives in a different category. If you want more deep dives like this into Aussie supermarket tricks, from fake dark chocolate to healthy cereals and sneaky yogurts, hit like and subscribe so we can keep decoding your trolley together. Tell me in the comments which of these 7 dark chocolate traps shocked you the most. Was it the block that is more than 50% sugar, or the one you always thought was the grown-up choice? And what should we investigate next time you and I walk this aisle together? Stay aware, stay sharp, and protect your plate.